Yep, we're doing this all over again, boys. Ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between, welcome back to another video by yours truly, and today I'm going to be reviewing the well-loved, star-studded, and frankly, one of the best animated films released in 2024, The Wild Robot from DreamWorks Animation. Now, back before I watched it, I had heard of the movie before, but I didn't really think to watch it in cinemas initially since, well, if you don't know already, I'm currently still serving the military, so I don't have a whole lot of days that I am just free to do whatever I want, and I thought that I should just wait for it to be released on streaming platforms like most movies that I watch these days. That was the case at least until I heard of it being nominated and winning a crap ton of awards, such as 10 nominations for the 52nd Annie Awards, including Best Feature, Best Effects, Best Character Animation, Best Character Design, Best Direction, Best Music, Best Production Design, Best Voice Acting, and Best Editorial. Oh my god. Nominated for Best Animated Feature Film for the Golden Globes. Okay, so I've just been informed that The Wild Robot has lost to Flow for the Best Animated Feature Film at the Golden Globe Awards. Winning Best Animated Feature in the Astra Film and Creative Arts Awards and in the Washington DC Area Film Critics Association. Currently running for Best Animated Feature, Best Adapted Screenplay, and possibly Best Picture in the Oscars, and way more that you could see on the Wikipedia page for this movie. Like, there's just a crap ton of awards that it got nominated for. Like, it's a big ass list. And on top of all of that, Twitter has been screaming, like, constantly about how amazing of a movie it is for its animation quality, story, and writing. In fact, reception has been so positive that the movie returned back into theaters around the world on the 17th of January 2025. And when I saw this, I was kind of stunned, because 2024 had been filled with mostly pointless sequels and live-action remakes of animated films from the previous decade. So to see an original animated film gain so much stardom in 2024 was frankly, it was shocking to me. Hence, when I finally found the time, I went to watch the film with my family in cinemas recently, and whoa. Simply put, this is definitely one of the best animated movies that I have seen in a very long time, and even amongst the sea of live action movies, it is way up there in my personal tier list of movies. But of course, before I dive into why I believe that's the case, do note that I'm going to be covering every major plot point of this movie, so please watch the film before watching this video, because it is definitely worth your time, especially if you go in blind. And with that, let's begin with my review of The Wild Robot. Now, for your convenience, I'm going to be splitting this review into 4 parts: the story, the voice acting, the audio, and visuals, before giving my final rating. Now, because the story will probably take up like a good half of this video, it will be split into the good, the bad, and the film's faithfulness to the original book. Now, I'm saying all of this so that you guys can have an easier time following along, because this review is going to be packed like with loads of stuff. Oh yeah, and one more thing. To challenge myself and to better fit with the themes of the movie, let me just okay, here we go. Just give you a quick wipe, and there you go. I'm going to be doing this review on an island in a forest, because you know the movie happens on an island in the forest. You get the idea. Oh, this is gonna be such a pain in the ass to film. By the way, I actually got like actual filming permit from the Singapore's National Parks Board, so yeah, please subscribe.
Do you need assistance?
Directed by Chris Sanders, who also directed How to Train Your Dragon, the film starts off with a robot named Rosm7134, or Roz, getting washed up on the shore of an island after a cargo ship carrying her and other Rosm units sank during a typhoon. After being activated by a bunch of orders by accident, she proceeds to explore the island in search of anyone to assign her a task. However, after failing to find any other humans and experiencing tumultuous run-ins with wild animals, she activates learning mode to decipher the language of the animals in the hopes of potentially being of better assistance. Unfortunately, even after that, the animals either attacked her or avoided her, seeing her as some sort of monster. She eventually determines that she was not supposed to be on the island and tries to signal for Universal Dynamics, the company she was made by, to bring her back to the factory, but fails multiple times. This lands her in an attack from Thorn the grizzly bear, who she narrowly escapes from. Sadly, in the process of doing so, she accidentally kills a family of geese, leaving behind a singular gosling egg. She then decides to keep it with her until it hatches not long after. However, since the gosling imprinted on her, he follows her around, leaving the robot unsure of what to do with him as she insists on trying to signal back to the factory, only to then have her transmitter get damaged by said gosling. Not long after, Pinktail, a possum and a mother of 7, advises her to raise the gosling as her own, telling her to feed and train the gosling to swim and fly before winter comes along so that he will be ready to migrate. This unintentionally gives Ross a task, causing the robot to abandon her attempts to leave the island for the time being to raise the gosling. As she struggles to do so, Fink the fox comes along to help her out, initially in the hopes of just using her as an easy source of food. But over the course of a few months, the gosling, now named Brightbill, grows into a young adult goose, and the connection that Ross and Fink have with him only grows stronger. With Ross deviating from her original programming, she is gradually forming a stronger motherly bond with the young goose as she successfully helps him to swim. However, after Brightbill narrowly escapes an attack from a fish that I frankly forgot the name of, this bond is heavily tested when other geese reveal to him that Ross was the one that killed his biological family. Ross tries to explain herself to Brightbill, but he understandably gets really mad, feeling that all of the training that he's going through is pointless and that it is not worth it, before walking out. Wanting to clear her mind from what happened, Ross walks to the shoreline where she discovers the remains of other ROSM units that had washed up on the island, allowing her to learn a little bit more about her origins and what she was originally designed to do. After successfully activating a damaged but functioning ROSM unit she named Rummage, Ross asks the other robot for help but fails to get anything useful except for a functioning transmitter. Eventually, Fink finds her and encourages the robot to not give up and continue helping Brightbill in whatever way they can as the day of migration is slowly approaching. Thanks to that, Ross pushes on and is able to reconnect with Brightbill to help him keep on training. After more time passes, Ross was eventually able to help Brightbill improve his flying skills and endurance, and before long, the day of migration arrives. Before Brightbill flies under the lead of Longneck, an older goose in charge of one of the migration groups, he bids his farewell to Ross and Fink and asks his mother for a boost as he takes off. However, unwilling to part with her son, Ross follows behind Brightbill until she was at the edge of the island as she watched her son do a final flyby before beginning his migration. Soon, winter comes along, and as the animals begin their hibernation, Ross activates her transmitter to return to the factory, before shutting it back off soon after as she changes her mind, reluctant to leave the island so as to watch her son return. Meanwhile, Brightbill and the geese takes a break at a farm in a city, where they encounter many ROSM units that unfortunately weren't as nice as Ross. And soon, robots known as Rico units were sent out to shoot down the geese as they were seen as a contamination. Brightbill was able to lead most of the geese to safety, but unfortunately, Longneck was killed trying to stop a Rico unit from shooting down his comrades. Back on the island, Ross wakes up to see Fink not sleeping in his den when he was supposed to. Apparently, the snowstorm that was raging on the island got so severe that he had to seek warmth in the shelter that Ross had built for herself, Fink and Brightbill back when they first met. Knowing that the other animals would have a slim chance of surviving the snowstorm, Ross rescues whoever she could and brought them all to her shelter, and proposes a truce within said shelter so that the animals don't eat each other. This goes on for some time until springtime began, and soon, Ross and Fink happily watched as Brightbill successfully returns home from the migration. Unfortunately, this happy reunion was short-lived as Universal Dynamics had been able to track Ross down, sending a robot known as a Vontra unit to retrieve her. But with Ross refusing to leave, Vontra summons multiple Rico units to come after her. The animals and Ross put up a good fight, but Vontra was able to bring Ross into her ship and wipe her memories and return to Universal Dynamics. Whilst the animals fought a forest fire caused by the damaged Rico units, the geese began attacking the ship, allowing Brightbill to break in and save Ross. Unfortunately, the memory wipe had finished and power had been cut from her. Fortunately, she was able to wake up with her memories intact, and together, Brightbill and Ross escaped the ship. Now safe from danger, Ross rebuilds her shelter that had been damaged from the fire, but knowing that Universal Dynamics will just keep coming back to the island to get her, she tells the animals that she will have to leave and return to the company to keep them safe. Everyone is reluctant on the idea, especially Bright Bill and Fink, but they eventually relent and Roz activates her transmitter once again, this time letting the ship take her away. A few months pass and we see that a refurbished Roz now works in the same farm that we saw Bright Bill and the geese stop by before. And as she goes about her task, a flock of geese fly by the farm and soon a familiar goose emerges from the bushes. Roz picks him up and the two share an embrace, indicating that Roz's memories are once again still intact. The end. Okay, now let's move on to the good, which is basically the elements of the film that I really liked. Starting off with the start of the film. Now, this is kind of just a happy accident really, but I like how there's no unnecessarily long string of studio titles like in many other films, which is kind of helped by the fact that this film was made entirely in-house at DreamWorks Animation. I know I say this because I think we all know every time we watch a movie there's a long string of studio titles at the front that often just makes you go is it gonna start? When's the movie gonna start? Anyways, once the film actually begins, the audience almost immediately sees Roz on the shoreline of the island with no backstory whatsoever. And it is only in the latter half of the movie where Roz, and by extension the audience, learns more about how she ended up on the island.
You are one of 6 Rosums lost from a container ship in a typhoon. So that is how I got here.
Presenting this in such a manner really helps put the audience in the same position as her, so people are unsure of what, how, or why Roz ended up there, and the audience really gets to feel the intensity and the uncertainty of the position that she's in during her first few days on the island. Now, of course, the second thing I want to point out that I really liked is the character building and development. So for this segment, I'll mainly focus on the 3 core characters of the story, starting with Roz. Now, when we first meet her, we learn about what she was originally intended to be through her dialogue and her actions.
Excuse me, did you know I can assist with grocery shopping, banking, landscaping?
Aside from her explaining her use as a helper robot, we see that she is able to also observe and learn from her own environment to improve her own abilities, such as when she escapes from the waves in the beginning by mimicking the movements of crab and climbing up a cliffside, or when she sits for days, possibly weeks on end, to listen and slowly decipher what the animals are saying. Besides that, we really get a front row seat alongside her as we watch her struggle to fit in and trying not to get into trouble, especially considering that she was not designed for the wilderness. I mean, look at her, she's like a big white robot trying to disguise in the forest. All the while still trying to follow her programming and seeking out for anyone to assist. We see even more of her initially strict programming when she immediately just drops the idea of getting back to the factory the moment she is assigned the task of taking care of Bright Bill, kind of by accident of course.
Without an assigned task, my next priority is to return to factory.
Taking care of him is your task now.
Task acquired. Return mode delayed. A Rosum always completes its task.
But slowly as time goes on and she takes care of Bright Bill, we begin to see her deviating more from her original code, behaving more motherly, sounding less robotic, and becoming capable of lying, for better or worse. Even when you look at her choice of words, she begins using more personal terms like, oh, I want, or I intend, I need, or I feel.
Even though Bright Bill does not want me here, I needed to know if he made it.
Breaking the rules? I thought you had to do what they told you.
Because of this, her struggles to be a mother figure becomes more apparent midway through the movie, trying to come up with solutions outside of her programming that made it seem impossible to accomplish her task, which in effect allows her to begin expressing emotions and think outside of her programming perimeters. But eventually she is able to get the hang of it, such that we get to see her truly develop a strong motherly love for Bright Bill, going so far as to stay for the winter just to see him return. Even though her task is technically done, her care and love for her son got so strong that even after Universal Dynamics' otherwise destructive attempts at erasing her memories twice, she still remembers everything that she's been through, making her becoming something more akin to being truly alive. So yeah, I just really like that they presented Roz's transformation from being something to someone as a sort of transition that she has to struggle through as she tries to understand the emotions that she wasn't programmed to have to begin with. For some idea of what I mean, let's take a look at another piece of media that also has the same core idea of an intelligent robot becoming human.
You're starting to piss me off with that coin, Connor.
Sorry, Lieutenant.
The game Detroit Become Human follows the story of androids in the near future becoming sentient and trying to free themselves from the leash that humans have on them. And while the game has 3 storylines, one of which also involves a female android becoming a motherly figure by the ways, all 3 of them have one thing in common, and that is that when the situation arises, the androids break through some sort of like barrier in their code that once they do will begin to behave more human. While I really like the game and the dynamics of its characters, I feel that its portrayal of robotic deviancy is not really that realistic. I mean, don't get me wrong, obviously something like this hasn't really happened yet in real life. But if it did, I don't think a robot would only have to overcome like, a few lines of code and then suddenly snap and then behave like a human. So I think the Wild Robot's portrayal of robotic deviancy as more of a journey that they have to learn along the way is much more logical and also very comparable to how humans and artificial intelligence in real life learn in general. Like, it's not like we can just read up on something one time and then suddenly we become completely proficient at it. We have to take time to really process and gain experiences in order to really achieve proficiency. Similarly, artificial intelligence, at least as of the recording of this video, can exist only because it has to process large amounts of data, as well as identify patterns and relationships within it, and use algorithms to adjust its internal parameters based on the information it gathers. And even after all of that, it still requires manual work from humans to tweak its parameters in such a way that it can properly serve its purpose and prevent it from becoming a tool for those with malicious intent. And even then, sometimes it still doesn't work out. Hence, seeing Roz slowly evolve to express and possess her own emotions and thoughts feels like a very accurate reflection of how we as humans learn, and might one day also be similar to how a robot in the future might do the same thing as her. This helps the audience to have a stronger emotional attachment to the robot and empathize with her, which is really neat. And of course, watching Roz doing everything she could to help her son, even when she is faced with struggles, is just such a nice and heartwarming sight. And it's a wonderful and accurate representation of parenthood and what many parents around the world have to go through to ensure that their children get to have a bright future. The emotional bond between a parent and their child is one of the most powerful things in this world. And it's probably one of the only reasons that we as humans have even made it this far to begin with. It is a force that is beautiful and essential to many of us, so seeing a robot be able to build that bond with her son over time is truly an emotional spectacle. I mean, just look at what many parents on Reddit say after watching the film. It really goes to show that Roz's story is one that many people can relate to. But besides that, Roz's journey of robotic deviancy is also very comparable to the struggles of many out there who are unable to be themselves and are unfortunately forced to follow some sort of social norm, or I guess you could say they are programming. But Roz definitely demonstrates that one should not be afraid to be themselves and just be who they want to be. While such a message is far from new, the way that it is done in the context of a robot is done in such a beautiful and inspirational way, such that a kid could watch it and be like, well, if a freaking robot can do it, why not me, you know? And even if you're not a kid, a message like that is sometimes easily forgotten in a world like ours that is polluted with so much noise from the internet that can easily cloud your judgment. So yeah, Roz's story is a wonderful encapsulation of essential lessons and values, which is expressed through her unique and awe-inspiring character arc that wonderfully connects with the audience at a deep and experiential level. But besides Roz, of course, there is also Bright Bill and Fink, who was by her side for the majority of her time on the island. Now, as the young Gosling grew, we see that Bright Bill picked up a lot from his mother, learning a lot of her mannerisms and trying to fit in with the rest of the world, but is seen by many of the other geese as like the neighbor's kid who should not have even made it as far as he did, since he is considered a runt. Insert definition of that there if you don't know. This of course leads to the big argument between him and Roz that ultimately leads to him possessing a heightened sense of worthlessness. This is all very reminiscent of youths in real life who also face similar situations of being outed by everyone else and being treated as like the weirdo, which some viewers, myself included, have been through personally before. So as someone with such an experience, seeing the film portray this problem in a way that isn't too stereotypical or exaggerated, but still captures the essence of it in a decently realistic manner is something I really appreciate. And seeing Bright Bill eventually becoming skilled and confident enough to migrate, lead, and be accepted by his skein, thanks to the help of his mom, is just a beautiful and heartwarming journey for the young goose. It serves as a nice reminder that even if you're weird or like outside of the norm, that there will always be someone out there looking out for you that will care for you and be by your side to the very end. And if push comes to shove, more people might even accept you for who you are. So yeah, that's really wholesome. On a side note, I've always had a soft spot for kids shows and movies that aren't just another piece of entertainment media for the youth and are brave enough to touch on really legitimate and common social problems here and there, since at least in Singapore there is this strange like general stigma against talking about this kind of thing openly in a discussion. Like sure, maybe you can talk about it in private, but it becomes a massive turnoff the moment you try and bring it into conversation with more people. So seeing a movie like The Wild Robot bring such plot points into its story, even if it isn't the biggest plot point, is something that I genuinely like a lot. And as for Fink, he acts as like Roz's guide to parenting and everything about being a more socio-emotional being. Like he's essentially the catalyst for Roz's deviancy from her programming and helping her become her own person. While his initial intentions were certainly deceiving, since the whole reason he even approached Roz to begin with was to have a decent source of food, he eventually becomes more and turns into a good friend for Roz to rely on and vice versa, even if he isn't perfect by any means. By the end of the movie, we see that Fink would go out of his way to help his robot friend in whatever way that he can, even if he doesn't like it, and eventually evolves to pick up on and embrace Roz's kindness and helpful nature. While I like the journey that Fink has throughout the movie, I just don't really have that much of an emotional connection to the character, since even by the end of the movie, we still don't really know too much about him besides the fact that not many of the island's animals liked him in the beginning and his childhood was a little bit rough.
Swimming's easy. I can teach him the way my mom taught me. Swim!
Don't get me wrong, I don't hate the character or feel like he isn't important at all. Like, I just feel that if the writers had invested a little more time in building his backstory and history, then the audience would have a stronger emotional attachment to him and thus appreciate his growth in the film way more. But unfortunately, we didn't really get that. So yeah. Now with all of that being said, when you put the three main characters together, it paints a really touching story of a group of people? I'm not so sure if you can call them that. So it paints a really touching story where three outcasts meet each other by chance and help each other break out of their programming or nature to become more than what they were born as. For Roz is becoming less of a robot and more of a self-aware, selfless and caring mother for her son. For Bright Bill, it's pointing a middle finger at nature and proving that he is as adequate of a goose as any other, despite being born with some disadvantages. And for Fink, it's breaking out of his sly and selfish attitude and becoming more of a caring friend for those around him. And together they form a small and wholesome family that conveys the message of the film really well through the hardships they had to face and the challenges that they had to brave through to make it to the end of the film, giving each of the characters a decent amount of emotional depth and complexity that enhances the audience's connection with the characters overall. So I think that at the end of the day, Roz, Fink, Bright Bill and everyone else were really well written, and you can tell that the writers put in a lot of effort to make them relate to the audience as much as possible, which, as someone who is trying to get into writing myself, I find it very admirable. Now the next thing that I want to touch on is the film's topics and world building. I really like that the movie is not afraid to enter darker topics despite its PG rating and its intended audience being families, such as when there is that shot of nothing but animals fighting one another, Pinktail very casually and hilariously getting past the death of one of her children, or okay, quote unquote death.
You're lucky you just have one, as a mother of 7. 6 babies. It's a full-time thing.
a shot of Roz and Fink finding some animals dead during the snowstorm, and the especially plot-relevant scene where Bright Bill's family is killed. But besides the scenes depicting death, we also see some shots of human civilization that, while not very important to the main story, helps us to understand the world of the wild robot and possibly explain why the weather is so unpredictably severe. For example, there was that shot of the Golden Gate Bridge submerged underwater with whales literally like swimming above it. And then there was also that shot of an entire city being submerged entirely underwater, and dilapidated satellite dishes in the desert, and a brochure that describes Florida as having more shoreline than ever. Wait. Let's take a look at the Golden Gate Bridge once more. Holy shit, that's like really deep underwater. But just how much must the sea level rise for it to get this deep? Hi, and welcome to the
Geeks to share something!
Woo! And today, let's just figure out how much the sea level rose based on that one shot alone. Okay, so based on the data that I could find online, assuming that the average distance between the Golden Gate Bridge and the current sea level is around 67 meters, so 67 meters. And assuming that the average height of a sperm whale is around 2.71 meters, so around 2.71 meters. And then finally, assuming that the thickness of the Golden Gate Bridge's roadway, inclusive of the railing and the underlying supporting beams, is around 7 meters. Then, if we gave an additional clearance of 5 meters for the sperm whale to conveniently swim above the Golden Gate Bridge's roadway like we see in the film, then the total increase in sea level from current day is 81.7 meters or 268 feet. That is 2.7 times the height of an average office building. And for just some more context on just how bad this is, at our current projection, if we looked at the worst case scenario in which our CO2 emissions double by 2050, then sea levels would rise by just under 1 meter at best, or almost 2 meters at worst. This is already enough to cause more severe flooding in countries like Singapore and submerge many, if not all, coastal cities if works aren't done to build seawalls to protect them. And keep in mind, that's all from just 1 to 2 meters of sea level rise. And if sea levels in real life were to rise as much as it did in the film, then this is how the world map looked like. Unlike the brochure we saw in the film, Florida would be completely submerged. A huge chunk of Southeast Asia, including my own country, would also be under the sea. Hell, many major cities like London, New York, New Orleans, Shanghai and Tokyo are also completely gone. Now, what could cause such a drastic increase in sea levels? Well, if you look at the number, it is not too far away from the number you'd get when you melt the ice caps completely. Antarctica wouldn't look like the beautiful sheet of ice at the southernmost point of the Earth. No, it will instead look like this. Now, don't worry too much though, since even if we continued at our current CO2 emissions rate, it would still take around 5,000 years before the ice caps melt completely. Although, with that being said, what the hell did the humans in the film do to cause the ice caps to melt entirely so quickly? Like bros, like speed running, like environmental destruction, oh my god. But of course, with all of that being said, that doesn't mean that we should just drop the ball and like stop caring about global warming. I'm gonna leave that to Goat Miner Guy, the movie reviewer, to go more in depth into that later on. For now, however, this has been
Goat Miner Guy Geeks to share something! Woo!
All of these short scenes indicate that not only did global warming reach an incredibly severe state in the world of the wild robot, but it could also be an indication of some sort of catastrophe of anthropogenic or natural origin that might have occurred at some point between our present day and the time period that the movie is set in. Now, I say that it could be of natural origin since the robots in the farm we saw in the film freak out when the geese show up, prompting the robots with freaking laser guns to go blasting away. And like, such a reaction is wildly unnecessary unless they are afraid of the geese severely harming the crops, which wouldn't really be the case unless Film theory, the geese and the wildlife are carrying a blight that impacts human agricultural crops, which is backed up by the contamination warning in the farm. Anyways, all of these small and subtle scenes alongside the natural setting that the majority of the movie occurs in obviously points towards an emphasis on environmental preservation and climate action that, despite being talked about in media like endlessly, is conveyed in this movie more subtly and doesn't try to like rub it in. Kind of like what I said in the Our House review video that I did a while back. The movie doesn't have a sign going, "Woo, screw global warming, nature, let's go," or like anything like that. But instead, it just simply lets the audience take in the beauty of nature and the dangers of anthropogenic activities on their own, especially with scenes like the one of the butterflies and the forest fire, which both look beautiful and honestly quite stunning. Stuff like this is why it won the Lura Greenpeace Award at the San Sebastian International Film Festival in Spain and was recently showcased at Climate Week NYC 2024, where it received a special screening at the inaugural Climate Film Festival, which is well deserved for a film like this. But besides that, we also get to learn a little bit more about Universal Dynamics and the workings of the futuristic megacorporation. It seems like the company is not only specialized in robotics, agriculture, and aerospace engineering, but it is also in charge of multiple cities around the world, which is hinted at in one of their advertisements.
Our communities circle the globe, welcoming all people who dream of a pre-planned life where every need has been anticipated, no detail overlooked.
While that is all we really know about the company, with some of it being pure speculation, it is likely that it will become a more imposing antagonist in future movies of this franchise, if any will be made at all. So yeah, the topics the film ranges across and the amount of lore is surprisingly deep for what would appear to be just another kids movie on the surface, which I especially crave since I absolutely love stories with deep amounts of lore that makes you like think of all sorts of theories about what isn't shown and just wondering how deep the rabbit hole goes. Like, I like FNAF, I like SCP, any kind of media that has like a crap ton of like lore. Lastly, I want to touch on the little tiny details that I noticed when I watched the film that I didn't exactly know where to mention, but I felt like I'd like to anyways, to show just how much attention to detail the writers and the animators put into this film. Firstly, while it is not very clear, in the months Ross spent with Bright Bill and Fink, she makes a small little garden beside the shelter like in the original book, so that's nice, I guess. Also, near the end of the movie, when the Rico units demand for Ross to cooperate, Bright Bill asked Ross what were the Rico units trying to say, since obviously the animals can't speak English.
Acknowledge return command.
What are they saying?
They want me to come with them.
And this isn't really a detail, but it's just, it's kind of funny how decades, or maybe even centuries into the future, the futuristic aircraft sent by Universal Dynamics is still able to succumb to birds, which, ooh, that's not good. Also, at one point when Bright Bill angrily tells Ross that her task is done, it seemed like a part of her original programming responded to that statement, as you can tell from the way Ross's LEDs change rapidly.
Look, Roz, whatever task you think you're doing, you're done. You can just leave.
Wow. And after all we've done for him, are you gonna let him do that?
But despite that, her new programming, or I guess in other words, her own personal opinions and thoughts, went against it and insisted on doing what is right for her son and continue to love him and help train him in preparation for the migration. Speaking of Roz, in the latter half of the film, her eyes seem to express way more emotion than when she first started. And it's beginning to like simulate that of humans and how our eyelids shift depending on our thoughts and emotions, which results in some pretty funny scenes.
Are others in danger?
On top of that, it also seems like the way Roz's CPU or whatever processor she uses handles her memories while she is sleeping is beginning to replicate the way that us humans do the exact same thing, causing her to begin experiencing like dreams and nightmares, as it appears that she wakes up from one when we cut back to her from the scene with the geese at the Universal Dynamics farm.
Bright Bill!
Oh, and one last thing that I'd like to mention is the way that this PG-rated movie was able to sneak in like a swear word when Peddler at one point yelled,
"Male bovine excrement."
And when you look at the synonyms for those words, you can, you know, very clearly see what they were going for. They went for bullshit, that's what they were going for. Okay, now let's move on to the bad. Now, I wouldn't even go as far as to say that these are like really, really bad points per se. More so that they are at worst questionable choices, and at best are just a bunch of nitpicks that don't really matter, because I just can't help but be the guy that goes, actually. Okay, the first thing that I want to mention is the pacing. While I didn't really feel that this movie felt too rushed or like too slow in any way, I felt that the way it handled the progression of the relationship between Roz and Bright Bill could have been like slowed down a teeny bit, just a little bit. I say this because what stood out to me, even during my first viewing of the film, was the fact that we get this time skip from when Bright Bill was a small gosling to when he is a young adult. Which felt strange because, I mean, after all, this movie focuses a lot on the love that Roz has for her son and how that connection matured and also helped Roz to learn how to be more alive. So to have such a drastic time skip that could have been used to allow the audience to have a stronger emotional attachment to Roz's and Bright Bill's connection felt a little out of place. Now, there are two ways that they could have fixed it, one of which is to make this movie a little bit longer. Like, this movie is only 1 hour and 42 minutes long, so if they had used maybe half an hour to further convey the relationship that Roz and Bright Bill have with each other, then maybe that emotional attachment could be strengthened. But you know, now that I think of it, doing so for a movie intended for kids is probably not such a good idea since, well, I mean, they're kids. They aren't gonna watch a movie that long. And like, on top of all that, I think people would probably need to bring more tissues to the cinema because many of them would bawl your eyes out even more if the movie was lengthened. Another way that they could have fixed this is to simply turn it into a full-on like animated series, which would not only appeal to more kids, but will give plenty of time for the audience watching to really appreciate the bond that Roz has with her son. But unfortunately, doing something like this would probably result in the writers having to stretch the relatively short book that the movie was based off of across multiple episodes, forcing them to have to come up with more original stories that the book's author, Peter Brown, may or may not be okay with. And even if that weren't an issue, because of it being in the format of a show, it would have probably not had the same far-reaching effect as the movie, since a lot of traditional people still have a preference to movies over shows, since shows nowadays require a subscription service to watch them on their respective digital platforms, whereas a movie simply requires a movie ticket when it is in theaters. So yeah, at the end of the day, while I wished that the movie had more length to it, it would not have gained as much success as it did if it got any longer or became a show. So yeah, I understand why the writers did what they did. Okay, the second thing I want to touch on is the logical problems in the film. And this part is a little bit more nitpicky and frankly a little bit more satirical. Like, I don't really care that these problems exist and they don't really impact my overall view of the movie since they are so minor, but I thought that I'd say them anyways because I think they're pretty funny. Firstly, I don't know what species the geese are in the movie, but if you ever come across them, stay the hell away from them. like bro, their beaks can somehow break through glass, and no, not even that. Their entire bodies can break through glass. Hell, like Bright Bill somehow survives a freaking collision with an airship's windshield at terminal velocity with only a broken wing. How do you survive that? Yeah, you know what, guys? I think the true message of this film is to stay the hell away from geese because they can really screw you up. Like, yeah, I have personal experience to back this up. Like, I got bitten by a geese like years ago when I was like posing beside one at Singapore's Botanic Gardens. Like, I had to put a plaster on my pinky, like I was posing like this, like squatting, and then it bit me. Anyways, moving on from that, Roz must be one really advanced robot, since she was able to find like so many perfectly fitting rocks to build the runway. Like I like, how do you do that? Like what? Either that, or she has some like laser cutter that she used off camera that helped her to build the whole damn thing. Like, I don't know. It's robots, am I right? Aside from that, there are also some like questionable decisions and actions that are seen throughout the film that, while I don't really care too much, because again, it's just a casual family movie and not some lore intense movie like the FNAF movie, but I still want to point out either way. Like, why did Roz not show up immediately to meet Bright Bill? Why were there so many Rico units sent to retrieve Roz? Why were the Rico units like so much more fragile than Roz? Why didn't Vontra just copy-paste Roz's memories over if Universal Dynamics needed the data so badly? And also on top of that, like, how is Roz going to explain to Universal Dynamics the reason that the first ship that they sent freaking exploded? But honestly, even with all this being said, I don't really have any major complaints about the movie, so yeah, it's pretty good. Anyways, we of course can't talk about this movie without of course touching on the book that it was based off. Now, I have read through the whole of the first book, and I'm currently reading through the second book of the 3-part series. But for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to touch on the first book, since basically the entire movie happens within the bounds of that book. Immediately when you read the original book and look at the original designs, you see that there are quite a few differences here and there. Like how Roz and the rest of the robots look way more like old school depictions of robots, and how some characters were not as central, or even just straight up like fully didn't exist in the book. Most notably Vontra's absence, and the fact that Fink was just another animal that didn't really play a whole lot of role in the central story. On top of all that, there were also some minor plot points that didn't make it into the movie, such as the original Roz purposefully disguising herself with the wilderness, or the fact that there were multiple shelters that Roz built to protect the animals during the snowstorm, instead of, you know, doing what she did in the film and squeezing the predators and prey into like a single shelter like we see in the film. However, despite the omissions and inclusions that the movie had compared to the book, I think that the movie was still able to convey more or less the same story to the audience in a similar, if not better way than the book did. For example, when I read the book, what stood out to me the most was not seeing Fink constantly by Roz's side. And while it is definitely an interesting change that the movie made, I felt that the character really helped to make Roz's growth seem way more believable. Because in the books, all we are told is that she just kind of learned from all the other animals that she befriended. And while I mean that isn't wrong either, I felt that the way the movie executed this makes a whole lot more sense to have a specific person to essentially act as Roz's teacher. So yeah, it's kind of analogous to say like a new kid who just joined a school and in a class. While it's good to have the whole class helping out, it's still optimal to have like one person to be by their side at all times to guide them through all the nitty-gritty stuff. Overall, this movie is able to balance things out with the book really well. Like, it's not so faithful so that it can make up its own little plot points and details to improve the story, but still faithful enough that it is still able to send the same message and possess the same vibe as the original story of The Wild Robot. Now, with all of that being said, let's finally move on to the voice acting.
Now, skunk!
I do not want to do skunk.
Skunky.
Now, unsurprisingly for such a star-studded cast, the performance of everyone was absolutely amazing, with the voices of many famous celebrities such as Lupita Nyong'o, Pedro Pascal, Kit Connor, Bill Nye, Stephanie Su, Mark Hamill, Catherine O'Hara, Matt Berry, and Ving Rhames. Most notably, I think Lupita, the voice actress for Roz, did an especially outstanding job at capturing the robotic and synthetic nature of Roz's voice in the beginning, making it very reminiscent of the kind of voice you'd hear from a virtual assistant like Siri or Alexa.
Hello, bonjour. Guten Tag, Hujambo. Hola. Congratulations on your purchase of a Universal Dynamics robot. I am Rosm7134. A Rosm always completes its task. Just ask.
But what really makes her performance stand out from everyone else is the way that she handles how Roz's voice changes as the robot slowly finds her own identity. As time passes, Roz slowly begins to have more imperfections and inflections within her voice that replicates what one would hear from a person, such as the occasional stuttering and having more emotions put into her words depending on the situation. And Lupita was able to reflect that transition perfectly in such a way that it doesn't occur so fast that it becomes very abrupt and obvious, but just at the right pace that the audience can subconsciously register in their heads, such that by the end of the film, we can truly appreciate the stark contrast that her new voice has compared to her old one when she is working at the Universal Dynamics farm.
Hello, I am Rosm7134.
But you can call me Roz.
You can really tell by the end of the film that she has changed a lot just from her voice alone, because the difference is insane. So yeah, Lupita was the perfect voice actress for the role, and it's pretty clear that she really poured her heart and soul into her performance. Honestly, hats off to you, Lupita, freaking outstanding. But besides her, Kit Connor, the voice actor for Bright Bill, also did an excellent job of portraying the character's naiveness and awkwardness in the beginning as the young goose struggled to fit in. Connor was especially able to convey the harsh emotions that ran through Bright Bill as he came to terms with his origins and accepting his imperfections in such a way that the audience can hear just how the young goose evolved and became more confident over time to eventually become increasingly independent and caring, just like his mother. So yeah, honestly, props to you, Connor. Also, I just discovered that the dude is only a year older than me, so that is quite a discovery. God, wait, I'm gonna be 20 this year. Oh yeah, also, when I watched this movie, I didn't know that Pedro Pascal was in it, at all. So when I saw in the end credits that he voiced Fink, I was freaking shocked. I was like, that's Pedro Pascal? The Last of Us Pedro Pascal? The same guy, the same exact dude? I couldn't even tell. Holy shit. Honestly, I shouldn't have doubted his talent to begin with. Wow, he did a fantastic job. Alongside that, I also want to give a special mention to Stephanie Sue and Mark Hamill's performance as well. While they only had a few lines throughout the entire film, the two of them were able to fully capture the essence of their characters, with Stephanie conveying the deceiving and intimidating nature of Vontra, and Mark channeling the frightening and deep voice that one would expect from a grizzly bear like Thorn. But yeah, the cast did a great job overall, so there's not really much to complain about or criticize. Anyways, aside from the voice acting, there is of course the rest of the audio that we hear throughout the film, from the sound design to the film's soundtrack. So yeah, let's dive right into that.
How do you tell a story about something you say you know nothing about?
You'll need to be more specific.
Love.
Now, I'm going to leave most of the professional analysis of the movie's audio to another reviewer that's more well-versed in the area, but I still want to give my 2 cents on the matter since, well, either way, most people aren't really audio experts anyways. So with that being said, let's first look at the sound design. Now, it again should come as no surprise that the Foley team that worked on the background sound effects really encapsulated the audio experience that one would expect to get with a robot roaming around in an actual forest. From the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks in the beginning of the film to the little and very easy to miss metallic clinks that the surface of Roz's body make when it interacts with her environment, which is indicative that the Foley artists did an astounding job at producing such sounds in their studios, or probably even going out in the wild to record more complex audio such as the animals, groans, and chitters. But of course, we can't really talk about this movie's audio without touching on the film's soundtrack. Composed by Chris Bowers, the score, alongside 2 original songs performed and co-written by Maren Morris, does the visuals of the movie full justice and is able to complement whatever is occurring within the scene. There was no point that I felt that it was too out of place or distracting, which says a lot since, no joke, the majority of my music library on my iPhone is literally just soundtracks from movies and shows like Interstellar and First Man. So Yeah, my bar is pretty high. So to summarize, the overall audio experience in the movie is a wonderful translation of the story's emotions, substance, and tensions to the audience, and pairs up really well with the visuals to form a complete package that is presented before the audience. Oh yeah, and speaking of visuals,
They were bored and wanted to see stuff sink.
Death's proximity makes life burn all the brighter. It's true. Yeah.
unlike some of the past animated DreamWorks films that used just pure 3D animation such as Shrek and How to Train Your Dragon, the Wild Robot went down a similar vein as Puss in Boots: The Last Wish and The Bad Guys, both of which are also well known for their unique animation styles. The animators used a blend of 3D animation and traditional art by creating and animating the standard geometrical shapes that's used in the former, but also incorporates hand-painted textures for the surfaces, which you can actually observe when you look closely at various sceneries and characters throughout the movie. This essentially gives the whole film a kind of soft textured look that, despite technically not replicating the real world as well as standard 3D animation, it makes every single shot convey the beauty and emotion of the scene in a way that standard 3D animation can never truly achieve. In fact, when you compare some of the concept art of the movie and what ended up in the film, you see that the animators did an outstanding job at translating the concepts over to the big screen without losing their charm in any way. I mean, just take a look at the background environments throughout the film. I don't know how to describe it properly, but they feel so much more lively and organic than other 3D animated films and shows I've seen in the past. Like, storms appear more rough and forests appear more alive in a way that I've only seen a few times before. It actually kind of reminds me of the style of paintings made by Monet. I actually went to an art exhibit recently consisting of a lot of his artwork, so yeah. Even the characters carry on these properties, with the animals having fur that looks like so much softer, and Roz having like moss growing on her body that looks more natural than if one were to try and achieve the same qualities in standard photorealistic 3D animation. I especially want to highlight the animation work that was done for Roz, which kind of reminds me a little bit of the movements of the robot from Meet the Robinsons, except that in Roz's case, she moves more gracefully and methodically, like she's completely in tune with her movement and is able to easily adapt her limbs to whatever environment or situations she ends up in, which is honestly so satisfying to watch. So yeah, the animators really thought through the style they wanted to go with and carefully considered what suited best for the story at hand. And considering that the original book is aimed at kids, they really hit the nail on the head with what they ended up with. In fact, you could probably take the film, turn it into a picture book for kids, and they would love it just as much, if not more, than the original book. I just hope that if they do intend on making future installments of this franchise, they are able to maintain this level of quality over, since this is the final film to be animated entirely in-house at DreamWorks, and the studio would from now on rely more heavily on external studios after 2024. So yeah, good job guys, keep up the good work, yay!
Thank you for looking after Brightville.
Goodbye, Roz.
So yeah, all in all, I think that this movie is definitely up there with the other amazing DreamWorks films that have been made in recent years. But unlike many of its animated films that often delve into the world of fantasy and magic, this is a movie that is very much grounded in reality, with its themes that cover many areas that hit close to home for many of us. From the struggles of motherhood and being out of the ordinary, to the looming threat that climate change and extreme weather phenomena have on the planet. This film serves as an important lesson not just for kids, but also to anyone else in other age groups that, while the world may be a harsh place, filled with demanding expectations, some of which having been present since the day we are born, all that matters is that at the end of the day, we should not let reality hold us back from expressing who we truly are and simply do the best that we can in whatever we do for ourselves, our loved ones, and anything else that we care about. Alongside that, this film also highlights to the audience the sheer beauty and importance of the natural world that many people tend to neglect, especially for those who live deep in cities, and subtly reminds us of how impactful the consequences of our activities can have on this world, in the hopes of preventing our homes and livelihoods from becoming submerged in the ocean or destroyed by extreme weather in the near future. While it is true that committing ourselves to protecting and preserving this planet is one hell of a responsibility to take charge in, this film reminds us that it is more than imperative that we must set our sights on this one common goal so that our future descendants can live in a world that is still sustainable for them. After all, despite us not being able to ever have the chance to meet most of them, our descendants are still a part of our families, and we have to protect them in the same way that we protect the families that we have right now with us. Will it be easy? Absolutely not. But like what Roz says in the movie,
sometimes, to survive, we must become more than we were programmed to be.
And with that, I'm proud to give this movie an overall score of 4.5 out of 5. Oh wait, I just received news right now that it has been confirmed that a sequel is in development. Free tickets for the sequel, please, thanks. Well, that is all for my review of The Wild Robot, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. Of course, huge thanks to Chris Sanders, Peter Brown, Lupita Nyong'o, Pedro Pascal, Kit Connor, and everyone else that worked on the film and story for making it all possible to begin with. I am so glad that they were able to make this beautiful story and put it out there in the world for all of us to truly appreciate. So yeah, thanks guys. By the way, this is only the third time I've done anything like this. The other two being my Apple Vision Pro impressions and the Our House review videos. So I really hope I've improved over that time. If you have any suggestions or corrections to whatever I said, or you have a different interpretation of the film or the book, you do drop them down below in the comments, and do like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. It really isn't easy to film videos like this right now, since again, I'm still serving the military until sometime in 2026. So if you'd like to show your support, I'd really appreciate it if you can check out some of my other content like gaming, reactions, and my live streams. Anyways, enough of the self-promo. If you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching. And if you want more stuff like this, you know what to do down below. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye!